Editing OSM, we start obviously by going to OpenStreetMap.org. From there, if you're signed in, it will be showing your name up in the top right corner. If you are not signed in, then you will have the option to either register or sign in. Once you're signed in, you'll have the option to take a look at the history. You can export some data and you can do some editing. For today, we are interested in the edit feature. So I advertised this event as an introduction to the ID editor, which is the built-in OpenStreetMap contribution tool that is all right in your browser. You can get into other options for editing on your desktop, like Potlatch and JOSM, but those ones do require some download. So this is a really good place to start because we don't have to worry about any of that. Why is this not cooperating? Because it wants me to do the drop down. Sure. So as you saw there from that drop down, you can do your in-browser editor, or you could go with your JOSM, your Potlatch, whatever else. We're keeping it easy today with ID. So we can see here it's telling us to zoom in to edit. If you're zoomed out too far, you can't tell the difference between all of the nodes. So you're much more likely to make a mistake, which is why it tells you you have to zoom in order to do that. So let's get in, and you can see the further in we go, more nodes and ways and areas start to show up. So let's start by taking a look at, ooh, let's do that. So that's something that you have to watch out for as you're trying to drag around the map. If you do click on the wrong spot, you can make an unintentional change. There is a handy undo button, and when you go to save at the end, it kind of gives you a rundown of all of the changes that you're committing, so you can see if there's anything that you actually don't want to have in there. So I've been doing a fair bit of work in this area recently, so around McDougall. Most of what I've been doing is ensuring that our crosswalks are entered and some of the surrounding sidewalks where necessary. I was talking with Jeff about this earlier. Raymond, you might have heard it as you came in, and even prior to this call starting, Randy and I were having the conversation about how much is actually missing from OSM when it comes to Windsor. As we can see in this zoomed in view here, we do have our roads, we have our alleys. There's the crosswalk that I put in, but none of our actual sidewalks are mapped. So sidewalks are pretty important. They're something that it's very nice to have in. So if we want to add a sidewalk, we would do that with a line. We can see here up at the top, we've got the option to add a point, a line, or an area. Sidewalk is a way. That is basically what OSM calls any route, anything that someone can travel on. So whether it is a sidewalk or a road or a path through the woods, that's going to be a way. So we're going to click on line to add one, and we're going to zoom in a little bit closer so that that's big enough for all of you guys to see, and also so that I can see better what I'm doing. So I know that I want my sidewalk to be connected to the crosswalk because you should be able to go smoothly from sidewalk to crosswalk. So I'm actually going to start this way on the crosswalk itself. So that's going to be the very first node that I click, is the one that already exists. And now I'm going to take us down the street. It's easy that the sidewalk is pretty nice and straight. So I'll add a node there just to kind of create this one section to make it easy for what we're learning here. So we can see that I have it selected, and we're getting the error message over here at the side that this line has no tags. So we need to choose a feature type for it or get rid of it. We can't just have a line that is nothing. So what we want to have in here is, this is a footpath, and it's telling us that we are crossing something. We're crossing the service road, which is actually kind of the driveway for this parking lot here. So we can connect the features, and that automatically adds a new node that shows the connection from this footpath to the service road that it is intersecting. From there, we can get into adding in some of our tags. So the sidewalk does not have a common name, so we don't need to worry about that. Most of the sidewalks in Windsor are concrete of one form or another. I'm familiar with this area. I feel confident in saying that this is, in fact, concrete. If you're not certain, you can just leave it blank. If you don't say what the surface is, it doesn't really make a big difference for what we're doing right now. Same with the width. I have no idea, so I'm not going to put it there. At this point, we mostly just want to make sure that we have this marked as something that is a sidewalk and making note of what access is allowed. So we can see here already that OSM is able to make some educated guesses. So it's going to guess that motor vehicle is no, because it is a designated footpath. Bicycles and horses. Horses, I don't know that horses are allowed on any of the roads in the city, really, but definitely not on the sidewalks. Bicycles, regardless of what some city councilors will tell you, bicycles don't belong on the sidewalk, and we're going to say no.
Former city councilor.
Former city councilor. Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, as for inclines, it's Windsor, safe to assume it's 0. So we can leave that one as it is as well. Now, when we get down to this tags section, there are 2 different ways we can look at that. So we can see the view we have right now, that's more of a table with drop downs. So it has already created some tags based on the allowed access and the feature type that we've set. We could add another one by using the plus button here, which will add a new row, or using these icons at the top right side of that chart, we can switch it to text input, which is my preferred way to do it. So what I'm going to enter right here is we want to specify that this is a sidewalk, because a footway could be a path through the woods, or it could be a cobblestone path through a park. There's lots of different things that this could be, but we want to specify that it is a sidewalk. So we are going to add footway equals sidewalk. And that's the tag that's going to let OSM know that that is specifically what this is. It doesn't matter the order that you put your tags in for what we're doing here. In some cases, it might, but I have yet to find a time when the order of the tags did matter. However, OSM is so vast that I hesitate to say anything definitively. So I'm going to say generally doesn't matter, but don't quote me on that. So that, when we click off of it, we now have our sidewalk way existing, which is awesome. Very nice. If I wanted to extend this, because it does continue a straight line under these trees until we get to the corner, there are a couple ways that I could do this. The easiest is just to click on that node and drag it to the corner. If I want to then continue going around the corner and down this next street here, I can right click on it, and we'll see here this little blue plus. That is to continue that line. So if I want to keep drawing from that point. So this will mean that I don't have to create a whole new line that I have to retag. This is all going to be part of the same segment, basically. So I have to make some guesses here because we're going underneath the trees, but we've more or less got it. So we're going to follow that straight line down the sidewalk. If you remember before, when I crossed this service road down here, it gave me that error saying that the features weren't connected, and we needed to make sure that they were so that OSM can properly route from one to the other. To avoid getting that error, I can click on this service road as I'm passing over it, and that will connect them. So when I do eventually finish this line, I'll go ahead and click enter to finish. We're not getting the error that tells me that I need to connect those. So it doesn't make a huge difference, honestly, which way you do it, as long as you do connect them, right? It's one click to add it as I'm drawing it in, or it's one click to add it through the edit sidebar if I'm going to go about doing it that way. But in both cases, we do connect those features. So for me, it's fine either way. Again, other people might have different opinions on this, but it's all about what you personally prefer. Because I have it zoomed in so far, I do have to drop it and then restart a couple of times. So what we can see here as well, based on the imagery, we know that this is the entrance to a parking lot. So this actually is a service road that is just not marked. So we can make the decision right now. Do we want to add in that service road? Do we want to just leave it, ignore it, and focus on drawing our sidewalk? It is really up to you as the mapper for what you want to do. For me personally, right now, I want to finish drawing the sidewalk. So I'm going to draw it down to the corner here. There we go. Sidewalk complete down that end of the block. And now let's wrap it back around. So once again, we right click and continue. Now, if I had dropped it but didn't hit enter, I would still be able to continue drawing as I'm doing here without needing to right click to continue that line. There's nothing really wrong with it either way. So what I did there was I accidentally dropped it in the wrong spot. So I finished, so I hit enter to tell it that I'm finished drawing, and then just grab that node and kind of drag it over. But ooh, what has happened there is that it has joined that area. So I am going to do a cut. That's not cooperating. So I'm just going to Control Z until I get that separated, because that's what I want it to do. Now, what we're seeing up here as well is that my sidewalk should be connecting to my crosswalk, and right now it is not. So let's grab this node, bring it in. This is looking a little bit funny, but it is also really following with the way that this sidewalk is designed, right? So especially when it comes to getting the sidewalks to connect with some of the crosswalks, sometimes you'll get weird looking things where, are we drawing just a curve and then a single line coming off of it? Are we going to draw this as a complete like right angle at this one here? Since we already have the crosswalk drawn in, I would say let's not draw it as a right angle and instead just start extending our sidewalk from one way to the other. This is another one of those times where I would say it's not really a big deal either way. But what I'm going to choose for the corner that we're working on down here is to actually delete this one. So we're going to right click and delete. And then I want to drag, not like that. I'm going to right click on it and, oh, it won't let me continue from there. Fine, I see how it is. Let's do, so I'm going to right click and click on the scissors. So that's going to cut it at this node. So now you can see when I select this longer line, it is not also selecting this shorter point here. So that is what I want to get rid of right now. So we've cut it. Now we're going to delete it. And what I'll do from there is drag my crosswalk from both sides in to connect them. So now the sidewalk is connected to the crosswalk, and I'll drag that out a little bit more to get it more in the center of the sidewalk, so that when I start drawing again, it's still all together and going down the middle. So we can see here when I've right clicked on it that it isn't giving me the option to continue. That's no problem. It doesn't mean that I can't continue. It just means that this next way that I draw in, I'm going to have to re-tag. So I'm going to choose my line tool again, click on the node where I want to start, and then we're going to start dragging down the sidewalk. So I just realized that you can't see when I do that. If I want to drop my node, I can hit my space bar and it leaves the node where I left it, Control Z to undo, or I can click and that will leave the node where I left it. Once again, Control Z to undo. And I'm seeing now that I didn't quite center that original node as much as I might have liked to. So that's something that I'll have to deal with. So I'm going to hit enter on that one now so that I can scroll my map around. Usually I wouldn't be quite so zoomed in, but I want to make sure that y'all can see what I'm doing here. So dang it, I just connected those again. So once again, just dragging it down all the way down the sidewalk. Sidewalks are like pretty easy when we're dealing with just nice square city blocks like this. I'm going to zoom out a little bit on that one since it's pretty straightforward what we're doing. And we're going to drag it down to here to connect with the original crosswalk that we had in. So when we zoom back in, we've now gone all the way around this block. And you can see that I've connected it here to the crosswalk, a little bit out in the road. So let's drag it in, attach, and wow, everything's bouncing around a lot. Okay. So I did note that I wanted it a little bit more centered at the beginning. So I'm going to scroll back up here, zoom back in here. So I'm trying to use the on-screen controls so that you guys can see what I'm doing. But if you do see that I'm zooming and you can't see that I'm zooming, I'm just using the plus minus keys to zoom in and out using those shortcuts. So now I'm going to slide this original node over a little bit more just to get that a little bit more centered. Now, if I really, really wanted to make sure that this was a right angle, ID does have some built-in methods for helping with that. So if I have both of these ways selected, then I can right click and it gives me the option to square them, which is really nice. Or if it was a circle, then this one up here would be available because it is, as I'm sure you know, going to be impossible to just freehand draw a perfect circle using tiny segments of straight lines. So if I click on the square option here, right now it's not doing it because I think I have too many things selected, but it will automatically make everything look nice and even for you, which is pretty cool. Now I have to remember here as well that this was starting a new way, so it doesn't automatically have the sidewalk tag that I had when I went around the rest of the block. So we need to set the feature type as footpath. We need to connect it to everything else that's going along. So we've got the parking aisle that crosses it, and we will connect that. And then let's say there are, once again, no bicycles, no horses, no motor vehicles, yes, for foot. And then highway equals footway and footway equals sidewalk. Now, if you're ever not sure about which exact tag you should be using, there are tons of ways to find out, and you will find conflicting answers depending on where you look. I tend to use the Reddit community more often than anything else because Reddit is just my platform of choice, but you could also use Discord, you could use Slack, you could participate in the mailing list. The mailing lists are like $2.19.95 for me, but some people are really into that. So give them a shot if that's what you're into. So what I want to talk about now is areas and specifically multi-polygons. So since everyone who's on this call has at least some experience with OSM, I'm not going to get, too crazy about here's how you use the area tool. But multi-polygons is something that from my travels on the internet, I have learned a number of users struggle with and don't necessarily quite understand what they're used for or how to use them. So let's talk about that and take a look at an example. In Windsor, I have a hard time finding buildings that will require a multi-polygon. The only one that I can really think of is the Chelsea downtown. So we'll see that right here. So everywhere that we see these red outlines, these are our buildings, right? So what happens when we have a building that has an inner courtyard, which is what we see in the case of the Chelsea? They've got that space inside where people will, like, I don't know, go to smoke or take their dogs out or whatever it is that they do in there. So how do we mark that? Because then it is drawing an area inside an area, basically. What I'm going to do here is we're actually going to delete this building for right now and recreate it. Deleting, and we can delete this one too. Oh, it doesn't want me to delete it. It disagrees with that. Well, all right, fine. We deleted the inner part of it at least, which is what we want to focus on. Zoomed in back over here. I also really like that this aerial imagery was taken during the downtown farmers market. The downtown farmers market actually is tagged as existing on Felicia Street, which is fantastic, even if it's only there one day a week. So it's really nice that the aerial imagery we have kind of represents that as well. Super cool. So looking in here at the Chelsea, we can see there's like a ladder laying down some of the inside courtyard that exists here. So it is still good to have that marked to give an accurate representation of what that building actually looks like. Remember, when we're looking at OSM through the regular non-edit view, the aerial imagery isn't always going to be showing. The person who is using it might have to turn that layer on. So knowing that a building does have a cutout in the middle can be pretty handy. So to do that, we are going to use our area tool, and this will be a good use of the square function that I was talking about before. And we're just going to click around to get to all of these little nooks and crannies. Every time I click, it drops a node, and that traces out our shape. Then I hit enter when I'm done. Going to right click and click on square, and it just kind of straightens everything out a little bit. So right now it has no descriptive tags, but that's totally fine. What I want to do is select the outside of the building, hold shift and select the inside of my building. And now we're going to have kind of those two different guys selected there. And then where is it? Merge these features. So that is going to bring them both together. So what should happen is now when we have one selected, yes, so what you saw there, as I select the outside, it also selects the inside. And that means it is a multi-polygon. So it is all kind of put together in there as part of the same building. So the building is here and the courtyard is here in the middle. Multi-polygons, very helpful. You might not use them a ton in Windsor, but elsewhere perhaps. Does that make sense? Any questions for anybody on that? Sounds pretty straightforward. Thumbs up. I like it. I like it. So something that is handy that I want to point out down here in the bottom right corner, we'll see this warnings and errors. So it shows us that there are two things that I have made mistakes on as we went on. So I didn't add enough descriptive tags to the Chelsea when I went through and deleted some stuff and then redrew it, and service road crosses pavement. So since I have come pretty far away from my service road crosses pavement, I'm like, oh man, do I have to scroll all the way back to that? Luckily, no. When I click on the warning, it brings me right back directly to that area. And what I'm seeing is this right here. The sidewalk that I drew crossed this service road, and I didn't add the node. So we could go ahead and connect those features, and now it's happy. And oh man, I scrolled all the way away from the Chelsea, and I need to go back and fix that. But before I do, I notice, oh no, that polygon doesn't make sense for the house that it's supposed to represent. Let's adjust it. And this is why having ADD and working in OSM can be problematic, because you can't finish one thing before you notice something else that needs your help. But that was a nice quick one, so I'm just going to take care of it before I go back here. And let's add some feature types. This is a building. It is the Chelsea. It is a building. Yes. How many levels does the Chelsea have? When I originally drew this, I was looking at it, and I believe it was 3. I don't know what the height is in meters. I don't know the address off the top of my head, but Google does. The Chelsea Felicier, depending on who you are, 570. No, that's, oh, right, because the Chelsea is now also a restaurant. That's not what I wanted. Former YMCA. What is the address of this place? If any of you guys know, please feel free to chime in, because apparently it's not called the Chelsea anymore. Chelsea Studios? 511 Felicia. And now I want postal code for that, N9A4L2. So as I'm editing personally on OSM using ID, I'm always back and forth between Google Maps and Reddit and Google searches, and then the actual OSM. Usually I have multiple windows going on, because even if I'm like standing there looking at this building, there's some information that I can get from looking at it, but not necessarily all of it. What we'll also see down here at the bottom of this one is the members. So when I went and merged those two areas together, we'll see that there's the outer line and the inner area. So that is what we have going on with our multi-polygons. and now that's all happy. Yay. So my edits look fine. Issues with everything else is 22. So these are issues that OSM has elsewhere that right now we're not going to worry about. We want to make sure that our stuff is good before we get into cleaning other people's messes. So what I did right there was I clicked this save button. Right, escape. You'll see up here in the top right corner, it goes kind of yellow because there are things to save. I'm going to click on it to save. And then putting the comment for your change set, just letting people know what you changed, sometimes why, just giving a little bit of information into what you were doing and where the data came from. So what we did here was we added a sidewalk, fixed a building polygon, and we updated apartment multi polygon. Now this was done with a couple different sources. A major one was the aerial imagery. So if I start, it'll give you, the list of what's there already, or you can start typing and it'll give you ideas. So we know that we used aerial imagery. We also used some local knowledge. It's nice, so we'll include those. I don't really have a field that I want to add. When you're a new contributor, by default, someone will be reviewing your edits. As you get a little bit more experience, your edits won't be automatically reviewed. But if you were doing something for the first time, maybe you're not certain about it, you can request that someone review your edits. You'll also get the full list here of everything that you changed. Then we click upload. So I do recommend saving kind of regularly as you're going through using ID, because if your internet drops or you accidentally close your window or whatever, you're going to lose all of the work that you have just done. So kind of like working in Microsoft Office, save your work regularly if you don't want to lose it, basically. Any questions about any of that? It's pretty straightforward, save your work as you go. It's pretty easy to deal with. Now, sometimes when I'm working through OSM, I find things that I dislike and can't fix. Right now, I swear it was just showing it now, I'm not seeing it. There was like a light blue line that was kind of cutting diagonally through everything. That is river area. I was actually talking to Randy about this earlier, that there are some areas marked on here that are set up in a way so that the average editor can't edit them for one reason or another. And now it's gone, so who knows? Or maybe it was never there to begin with, and I'm a crazy person. Both of these are it's back. I'm not a crazy person. Okay, so if you guys can see what I'm talking about, this right along in here, I just get to the right zoom level. So this light blue line, if we look down here in the purple, you can see it looks like there's some waves in it. That indicates river area. When we're looking around through the rest of the map, we can see all of these kind of like transparent sections. This one over here has got kind of green, we've got some yellow, there's some orange ones. So these are areas that will indicate different things. So orange is retail area, yellow is residential area. If you're not sure, when you have hovered over it, if you take a look at the edit sidebar on the left side of the screen, it will let you know. So these can be really useful for like if you want to label the BIAs. The residential area, this one doesn't have a name, but something that would be maybe like Southwood Lakes in South Windsor, right? If you want to give the name to the entire subdivision. River area should be used for, shockingly, the river, which is right here. But for some reason, we have this big line that cuts across the city and tells us that the middle of Windsor, downtown, is river area. I'm not sure if that's like looking at some old school floodplain data or where that came from, but it is there. I can't get rid of it. And and sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not. It comes and goes as it pleases, and I don't know why. But if anyone ever finds information about that, please let me know. So we can see here too that as I've been clicking around, I have done things. I moved something. Oh no, the alley crosses the building. That's right down here. We can see that I made that mistake, and that's not good. We don't want that. So what we're going to do is we've got our handy undo button up here. And there we go. Now it's fixed, and now we don't have any more issues with our editing. So undo button, very helpful. Keeping an eye down here for any error warnings, also very, very helpful. Zoom back out a little bit here and go see if there's something specific we want to talk about or look at. Down here at the bottom, seeing the number of hidden features. I always like that one too. It kind of gives you an idea of what you'll see if you do zoom in a little bit more. Some things here that can be good to check and can often be forgotten is keeping an eye on some of the original data that was put in here ages ago by who even knows who. A really good example of that is the Windsor-Detroit tunnel. Randy and I were working on a problem with this earlier where he's trying to use a routing service to get people to walk from point A to B, where point A, let's say, is up here on Freedom Way and point B is over here at this crosswalk on McDougall. Now, what was happening is the routing service keeps sending people through the tunnel, which A, doesn't really make a lot of sense, and B, pedestrians can't actually go there. So how do we fix that? We could do it through the routing service, or what we were trying to do is updating some of the tags. So if you remember when I created the crosswalks earlier and we had our allowed access area, it didn't really make a lot of sense the way that this access area was originally set up. So what we can see right now is basically it's saying nothing's allowed, but really motor vehicles should be allowed, but you can't go on foot, you can't ride your bike through there. And as much as I love the imagery, we cannot ride a horse through the tunnel. So we're going to want to check those to make sure. So if you're ever trying to use OSM in another service and you're finding that it's not making sense, coming into ID and checking some of these tags can be really useful. So what's happening here is it's saying it's not specified for foot at that section. So when it's not specified, I think OSM is always going to err on the side of, yeah, we can have somebody walk through there, especially if the routing service is trying to use the shortest way possible. But before we make the change here, let's double check if that is actually part of what we want to avoid. And it is not, because now we're looking at Park Street East. So people can actually walk, while preferably they would walk on the sidewalk and not down the middle of the road. People can actually walk through there. So that's when we get into talking a little bit about the colors that ID is using to represent different types of roads. This is more information that we can get once we click on it and we see our feature type. And this is one of my least favorite parts about OSM, but it makes you learn a little bit more about the world. OSM did originate in the UK, so a lot of the terminology is not going to be very specific or helpful when it comes to North America. Unless maybe city planners know. Jeff, have you ever heard of a trunk road outside of OSM?
In a British context, yes, but not in North America.
There we go. Okay, so this is not just me not knowing it. It is a British thing. So, okay. So when we come across these terms that we're like, WTF is trunk road, the little I here, very helpful. We can click on that and it will give us some good information on it. Important roads that are not motorways. Okay, but then what's a motorway? Because that's another one that we don't really use very often here in North America. So we can go into the documentation, which will handily open up in a new tab and will give us some more information about what we want to know. Is it fun to read through documentation? No, but it is helpful and necessary because it will make working in OSM a little bit easier. It might seem like it doesn't make sense to have this part of Park Street East counted as a trunk road if it's important but not a motorway. But I think it was originally tagged this way because it is the direct exit from the tunnel onto the next kind of major roadway. We could maybe make the argument that turning right out of here, which is possible, even if it doesn't seem like it should be, should that also be counted as a trunk road? I'm going to say no, because you're less likely to turn right and you're not going to meet up with an important road quite as early as you would otherwise. And we get that similarly here with the Nexus entrance off of, is that still Park Street there? I don't know.
It's City Hall Square at that point.
That's the actual road is called that? Weird.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good to know. Thanks, Jeff. See, you're a handy person to have on this call.
Yeah, and it looks like the trunk roads around the plaza are all the old, like the former provincial highways.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And we can get some information on that as well. If we click onto these and go down to the notes section, it is actually noted as the Highway 3B route, which connects the USA to the 401 via roads, which were Highway 3B. So some people go really in depth with their tagging here, which is like super, super helpful. Even if it is stuff that isn't necessarily still thought about that way, I kind of like this. I think it makes sense. So it's not something that I personally would change, which does bring up the next point of what happens if you get into like a editing war against somebody that you don't know who they are, but you change something. Like, I want to say that this isn't a trunk road, so I change it to something else, and then the next day I come back and it's back to trunk road, and then we're going back and forth. This is why, to Raymond's point earlier, it can be really nice to have some communication with the local OSM community to kind of work out some of these issues and have a conversation about why you think it should be one way or the other. So maybe you can come to a resolution rather than just like kind of constantly fighting with people about why the changes are being made. So again, that's another goal of our group here at Hackforge, is to try to make that a little bit more possible so we can have those conversations a little bit easier. The last thing that I want to touch on is nodes for points. So we've talked about nodes as each of these little gray dots that we're seeing here as they relate to the ways. So let's talk about them a little bit more as a point. So that would be a specific location, which is separate from the building. The point can be connected to the building, but it's not necessarily the same. And we have a good example of that with the bank here. So we can see if I click on the outside, it just says that the feature is a building, whereas the point is Scotiabank. So building is not incorrect here, but I think we could get a little bit more in depth with this. Oh, and see, even with my spelling mistakes, it knows what I'm talking about. We could set that as a bank. Could we set it as a Scotiabank? We absolutely can. We can set it as a Scotiabank non-Quebec, and we could use that to replace the point. We could keep both of them there at the same time. There are different conventions that seem to change based on where you are. And that is one of the awful but great things about OSM. The fact that there isn't necessarily a centralized point of source of truth for when it comes to the best way to manage these things. Sometimes different countries or different provinces or different communities will have different ways that they prefer to run their specifics. Like, do you count the point as the bank, or do you count the building as the bank, one way or another? The way that I look at it personally is, I would say in this case, since the entire building is the bank, that's how I would tag it. But if we were looking at a building further up the road, like that CIBC building right on the corner, since this is a building that has multiple things in it, I would tag the building as a commercial building and then put the points for everything that's in there: CIBC, the lawyer's office, the passport office, Time Kitchen, all of that. But I don't know that one way here is right and one way is wrong. It all just comes down to preference, but not necessarily personal preference, but more community preference. So as our group grows, this is hopefully something that we can start to build out. I have started a wiki page on the OSM wiki for Windsor, Ontario, so we can start keeping track of some of our preferred tagging and naming conventions, so that hopefully we can at least regionally get some sort of structure and cohesiveness going with how we're managing OSM. But this is something that is not up to just me. So I really hope that everyone continues to attend these events, which will allow us to, as a group, make democratic decisions on how we should manage some of these more specific things that don't necessarily have rules in the greater sense of OSM.